Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I'm gonna be comparing Copic Chows with Pro markers from Winston & Newton. I've got 3 Copic Chows on Monday to try them out because I wanted to have a gradient of grays. I thought about doing a comparison with Pro markers because I also got a few new of them, and I got one with a brush nib, and I thought it would be good to compare them and just let you know my first thoughts about them. So here it goes. And after this little introduction, I'm gonna put on a time lapse so you can see how they work together, and I'll tell you about my final thoughts about it. Well, first of all, I'm gonna be showing you a bit of the difference you can see when you look at them closely. So if you haven't seen them before, you can just see it. So this is a Copic Chow here, and they have 2 tips. One that's broad, like this one, kind of squared. It's very useful to fill things up, like big space or backgrounds. And then they have this other tip, which is a brush nib. This is how they are done. For Pro markers, they're different, slightly different. They have this one, which is a bullet nib. You can see it here. It's good for small details, and it isn't as good for filling big spaces. But they also have this other side, which is also a broader nib, as like it's kind of the same. I think it's even the same size as in the Copics. And then they also have brush markers. So I think these are new, like relatively new, I believe. Well, they have the same broad nib here, but in the other side they have a brush nib too. So I wanted to do a video comparison of them because I thought it will be interesting. So first I'm going to show you how they paint. Like the brush nib on the Pro marker paints like this. You can create a thinner line, so you can see. You can make it broad if you want to. And yeah, you can fill spaces quite nicely too. Oh, look, it's a smiley face. Alright, and the other nib just works the same. It's quite good to make something squared. But you can also use this bit, like the smaller bit, to create thin lines, and it works just fine. So what I've noticed comparing them is that the brush nib is much softer. Like you don't have to press too much to bend it as the Copics. I'm going to show you how they work now. So this is the broad nib. It's the same, works the same. The color always changes a bit when it's dry, so it happens on both brands. And then the brush nib here, you can see I'm applying the same pressure as before, and it doesn't bend nearly as much. I mean, if I will press too much, it will bend, of course, but you don't need to press it too much. And I think that's slightly better to make thin lines, for example, like this, because you can control much better the pressure. So that will be a plus I will give to the Copics. And I'm going to show you the bullet nib. The bullet nib is quite nice, as I said, for smaller places. You can also incline it a bit and fill up a bit more. But yeah, it's just a simple bullet nib. It's probably the same as in most of the markers around. So also, what I wanted to say is that I've noticed that the colors seem much brighter in the Pro markers. As you can see here, like this green is very bright, this purple is very dark and intense, this orange here is very intense too, and this pink here seems very intense too. I mean, they're all very intense, and if you try like the Copics, They're all very soft. They seem kind of pastel. I don't have all of them, but they definitely look much more pastel when I see them around. So that produces a bit of a softer change around. What I've noticed is that maybe with the brush markers they're trying to go more pastel-like. I will have to try and get a few more both of brush markers and both of Copics Chows to try it out, and I'll probably be able to share more about that. But yeah, definitely Pro markers seem much more darker and bright with the colors. Like even sometimes skin tones like this, maybe not this one, but some of them are really bright too. So yeah, as I mentioned while I was showing you, definitely the Copics have a much, for me it's better brush nib, so it's easier to work with, but also I really like much more the brush nib on the Pro markers than the bullet nib. The bullet nib is very useful for small spaces, but I think I much prefer to work with the brush nib instead. And yeah, as I was saying too, the color change doesn't really seem too deep. I mean, it's mostly the same on Pro markers as in Copics for what I've seen. What I do have noticed, as I said, is the color brightness of the Pro markers. Seems like the Pro markers are quite saturated, which is good if you want a saturated color, but Copics seem much softer, much more pastel-like, and which is very cool too, because for example I've seen some people paint with Copics before and they seem to create such soft skin tones and such soft tones, and I just thought that with Pro markers doesn't seem so easy to get like that degradation. Maybe I just have to get a few more Pro markers to see that, because the packs I have is like the basic pack that comes with 15 markers, I believe, and they're quite bright, all of them. And I've got a few separated ones, and I've got a skin tone set too. So maybe I just haven't gotten the right ones to work with pastel-like tones. But yeah, and what I've heard and seen is that Pro markers doesn't have as many color range as Copics, and yeah, obviously that's a problem. They are much cheaper, Pro markers, than Copics. Not that much cheaper than Copic Chows, but they are much cheaper than the other squared Copics. I don't remember how they're called. I believe they're called Copic Touch. So if you're starting out, maybe it will be better for you to just get a few Pro markers, try them out. They work very similarly, and maybe you can just slowly grow your collection. Also, what I've heard about Copics is that they kind of dry if you don't use them. I don't know if that's true because I only had them for like 3 days. But for me, Pro markers haven't dried in like the time I have them. I have been using them for a year or so. I got them about a year or so ago, and they haven't dried, and I don't use them that much. I've used them a lot for Inktober, and I use them sometimes for different illustrations, but not like a heavy use, and they haven't dried, except for 2 or 3, but I believe these ones, one is because I've used it a lot, and the other ones I think it was because probably there's something about them and the alcohol evaporates. They're just not rightly done. I just fill them up with alcohol and keep on using them. The color becomes a bit softer, but it's alright because you can keep using it for a bit longer. Pro markers last quite a lot, that's a good thing. And I will tell you later if Copics last so long as Pro markers, because I can't know by now. But yeah, definitely if you're starting out, just get a cheap pack and try them out, because I believe most alcohol-based markers act kind of similarly. So you should try them both and compare them for yourself, but as Copics are much more expensive usually to get a pack of them, maybe you should try just with a cheap Pro marker set, or maybe you can do what I do now, which is buy them individually. They're much more expensive to be bought individually, but you end up with colors that you like and not the colors that the set comes with, because in the set there's always colors that they're not what you expected, or maybe that you don't use as much. So yeah, maybe a basic set is good, like a set with different tones, with 6 or 7, but I believe, for example, for me, the 15 pack set is good, but it has like 3 or 4 colors I don't like too much and I don't use too much because I think they're way too strong. They're good for some things, but not for most of them. So I had to got other tones to match that up. But yeah, that's most of it, my opinion. You should try it yourself for a better understanding, but I wouldn't mind getting any of those for starting. Just keep in mind that if you're starting, maybe you should go for the cheaper ones and then try your way up. Maybe if you have the choice and you live near an art store, the best way is to just buy a couple of them each month or something like that, and you get to try them all out and compare for yourself. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was useful somehow. Keep in mind that it's just my thoughts. Give it a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye!